The man in the glass, Vincent Ashford, stood motionless at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his mountain estate, watching the December sun sink behind the jagged peaks of the Colorado Rockies. The whiskey in his crystal tumbler caught the dying light, amber and cold. At 37, he had built an empire in cybersecurity technology that protected governments and corporations across 3 continents. His name commanded respect in boardrooms from Denver to Dubai. But here, in this 7,000-square-foot fortress of steel and glass, Vincent was simply alone. The house reflected its owner's philosophy: clean lines, minimal decoration, everything in its proper place. The kitchen gleamed with unused appliances. The guest bedrooms remained perpetually made. Even the fireplace, a massive stone structure dominating the great room, sat dark and hollow. Vincent preferred it that way. Fire was unpredictable, messy, alive. He had learned to avoid anything that reminded him of being alive. Shadows of the past 5 years ago, Vincent had been different. He could still remember Emma's laughter echoing through the downtown loft they had shared, her paint-stained hands gesturing wildly as she described her latest art installation. She had been light and color and chaos, everything. Vincent was not. She balanced him, grounded him, made him believe that success meant nothing without someone to share it with. They were planning a spring wedding when the diagnosis came. Aggressive, advanced. 6 months, maybe 8. Emma lasted 4. Vincent threw himself into work with the single-minded focus that had built his company. He relocated to this remote estate, built custom to his specifications, 30 miles from the nearest town. No neighbors, no interruptions, no memories. He told himself it was about security and privacy. The truth was simpler and darker. He was hiding from a world that had taken everything that mattered. The storm Arrivist first snow of the season came early that year, a late November blizzard that buried the mountain roads under 2 feet of powder. Vincent barely noticed. He worked through the storm, 3 monitors glowing in his home office, code scrolling past like digital rain. When the power flickered at midnight, he cursed and reached for the backup generator controls. That was when he heard it, a car engine struggling too close, followed by the unmistakable crunch of metal meeting rock. Vincent grabbed a flashlight and heavy coat, stepping into the biting wind. 50 yards down his private road, a battered sedan sat wedged against a boulder, steam rising from its crumpled hood. The headlights still blazed, illuminating the swirling snow. As Vincent approached, the driver's door opened and a woman stumbled out, her dark hair plastered to her face by wind and melted snow. "Is anyone hurt?" Vincent called over the howl of the storm. The woman's eyes were wide with panic. "My daughter, she's in the back. Please, I need to get her somewhere warm." Vincent's training took over, the military discipline from his younger years snapping into place. He pulled open the rear door and found a small girl bundled in blankets, her lips tinged blue, shivering violently. Without hesitation, he lifted the child into his arms and turned toward his house. The mother followed, stumbling through the drifts. Uninvited warmth inside, Vincent's fortress transformed into something it had never been, a refuge. He settled the girl, Ruby, he learned, onto the leather sofa near the fireplace, and finally, reluctantly, built a fire. The mother, Nora, hovered anxiously, her hands shaking as she tried to dry her daughter's hair with the towel Vincent provided. He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with hot soup, warm bread, and blankets he had purchased years ago but never used. "I'm so sorry," Nora kept repeating. "I didn't see the turn. The GPS said this was a through road, but the road ends at my gate," Vincent explained, his voice carefully neutral. "Most people don't come this far up the mountain." Ruby, recovering quickly the way children do, peered at Vincent with enormous hazel eyes. "Do you live here all by yourself? In this whole big house?" Vincent paused, soup ladle in hand. "Yes. That's sad," Ruby announced matter-of-factly. "Houses this big should have lots of people. And dogs. Do you have dogs?" "No dogs," Vincent said. "That's even sadder," Nora flushed. "Ruby, that's not polite." But Vincent found himself almost smiling, the expression foreign on his face. "She's not wrong. As the storm raged outside, something shifted in the careful order of Vincent's world. Nora explained they were moving to Pine Creek, the small town at the base of the mountain. She had taken a job as head pastry chef at a boutique hotel after losing her husband 2 years earlier. Fresh start, new memories. A chance for Ruby to grow up somewhere peaceful. Her car was likely totaled. Her phone had no signal. They were, effectively, stranded. "You can stay here tonight," Vincent heard himself say. "Tomorrow, when the roads are cleared, I'll drive you into town." Nora's relief was palpable. "Thank you, truly. I don't know how to repay you." Vincent turned away, uncomfortable with gratitude. "No need." But as Ruby fell asleep on his couch, her small hand clutching a cushion, her mother sitting vigil beside her, Vincent felt something crack in the ice around his heart. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. A fissure in the armor he had spent 5 years building. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, the silence in his house did not feel quite so absolute. Morning light. Vincent woke before dawn, as always, to find his home transformed. Ruby's pink backpack sat by the door. Nora's boots dried on newspaper near the fireplace. The scent of something sweet drifted from the kitchen, impossible and real. He found Nora there, her dark hair pulled back, wearing one of his oversized sweaters over her clothes from the night before. She was mixing something in a bowl, using ingredients she must have scrounged from his barely stocked pantry. "I hope you don't mind," she said quickly, catching sight of him. "I couldn't sleep, and I found flour, sugar, some vanilla extract. I'm making pancakes. It's the least I can do." Vincent should have minded. This was his space, his routine, his carefully maintained isolation. Instead, he found himself saying, "Coffee's in the cabinet above the sink." They ate breakfast together as pale light filled the valley below. Ruby chattered about her new school, about the friends she hoped to make, about whether Colorado snow tasted different than Oregon snow. Nora smiled apologetically at Vincent over her daughter's head, but he waved it off. The child's energy was exhausting and oddly comforting, like standing near a warm fire after years in the cold. When Vincent drove them into Pine Creek later that morning, he expected that to be the end of it. A good deed done, a strange night concluded, life returning to normal. But as Nora gathered their belongings from his car outside the hotel where she would be working, Ruby threw her arms around his waist. "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Vincent," she said solemnly. "You're like a superhero, but quiet." Something twisted in Vincent's chest. He knelt down to her level. "You're welcome, Ruby. Good luck at your new school. Will you come visit us?" she asked. Vincent hesitated. Nora started to intervene, to tell her daughter not to impose, but Vincent surprised himself. "Maybe, if that's all right with your mother." Nora's expression was unreadable. "You're welcome anytime." The careful dance of Vincent told himself he wouldn't visit. There was no reason to. But 3 days later, he found himself driving into Pine Creek with a flimsy excuse about needing supplies. He stopped at the hotel restaurant where Nora worked, ordering coffee and one of her signature pastries. She emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting her sleeve, and her face lit up when she saw him. "Vincent. What a surprise. I was in town," he said, the light transparent. She slid into the booth across from him during her break. They talked about nothing important. The weather, the town, her adjustment to the new job. But underneath the small talk, something else hung. Recognition, perhaps. Two people who had survived loss and learned to exist in its shadow, finding unexpected companionship in each other's quiet company. It became a pattern. Vincent would drive into town twice a week, always with some excuse. He needed to meet with his accountant. He was considering investing in local real estate. He wanted to try that new hardware store. Each time, he ended up at the hotel restaurant. Each time, Nora would join him when she could, their conversations deepening, moving from surface pleasantries to genuine connection. Ruby adopted Vincent with the straightforward certainty of childhood. She insisted he attend her school's holiday concert, where she sang enthusiastically off-key in a choir of 6-year-olds. She begged him to help build a snowman in the hotel's courtyard, and Vincent found himself packing snow with his expensive leather gloves. listening to her detailed instructions about proper carrot nose placement. She showed him her drawings, elaborate crayon creations that covered every inch of paper with wild color. "This one is you," Ruby announced one afternoon, presenting a picture of a tall figure in black standing next to a house. "You're always wearing dark clothes, so I made you dark. But I put a yellow heart because Mom says everyone has light inside, even if you can't see it right away." Vincent studied the drawing, unable to speak for a moment. When he looked up, Nora was watching from the doorway of her small apartment above the hotel, her eyes soft with something that might have been understanding or hope, or both. "Fractures and confessions." It was Nora who finally broke through the last of Vincent's carefully maintained walls. They were sitting in his living room one evening in mid-December, Ruby asleep in the guest room Vincent had quietly prepared for her visits. The fire crackled between them. Snow fell softly outside. Nora had been unusually quiet all evening, and Vincent finally asked what was wrong. "I got a letter today," she said, her voice tight. "From my late husband's parents. They want custody of Ruby." Vincent set down his drink. "On what grounds?" "They claim I'm unstable, that moving Ruby across the country, changing her schools, disrupting her life proves I'm not fit." Nora's hands trembled. "They have money, Vincent. Lawyers. They've never forgiven me for taking their son away from Connecticut, for choosing a smaller life than they wanted for him. After he died, they backed off. But now, they're saying this move proves I'm running. That Ruby needs stability and family has family. She has you. I can't afford to fight them. I've looked into lawyers, and the retainer alone would wipe out everything I've saved." Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks. "I can't lose her. She's all I have left of him. And more than that, she's everything. She's my whole world." Vincent moved to sit beside her, an instinct he didn't question. "You're not going to lose her, you don't know that." "Yes, I do." He took a breath, the words coming from a place he had kept locked for 5 years. "My fiancée died. Cancer. We had 4 months from diagnosis to the end. I thought I died with her. I've spent 5 years proving it, hiding up on that mountain, convinced I was protecting myself from ever feeling that kind of pain again." Nora looked at him, really looked at him, and Vincent continued, "But you and Ruby, you walked into my life during a storm, and you reminded me that isolation isn't protection. It's just another kind of death." He reached for her hand. "I have resources. I have lawyers on retainer who handle complex corporate litigation. Family law isn't their specialty, but they can find someone who will take this case and fight like hell. Let me help." "Vincent, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering." His grip tightened. "You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. You gave me a reason to leave that house, to remember what it feels like to be part of something bigger than myself. Let me do this, please." Nora collapsed against him, sobbing with relief and exhaustion and something deeper. Vincent held her, this woman who had stumbled into his life by accident, and realized that nothing about this felt accidental anymore. It felt inevitable, like a path he had been meant to walk all along, but had been too afraid to find. The fight begins within a week. Vincent had assembled a legal team that made Nora's in-laws attorneys look like small-town amateurs. He sat through depositions, his presence steady and unshakable. Beside Nora as lawyers questioned her choices, her finances, her fitness as a mother. He provided character references, financial backing, and most importantly, his unwavering support. The hearing was scheduled for mid-January, but the battle had already begun. Vincent found himself integrated into Nora and Ruby's daily life in ways that surprised him. He attended parent-teacher conferences. He helped Ruby with homework, his methodical mind perfectly suited to breaking down complex problems into manageable steps. He made sure Nora ate when stress killed her appetite, showed up with takeout and quiet companionship when she was too exhausted to talk. One night, as they reviewed legal documents at his kitchen table, Nora suddenly reached across and took his hand. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. "Really? I need to know." Vincent looked at their joined hands, then at her face, open and vulnerable in the lamplight. "Because I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "Because Ruby calls me her friend, and I want to be more than that." I want to be someone she can count on. Because 5 years ago I lost everything, and I thought I'd never want to risk that kind of pain again. But you've shown me that the real risk is never loving at all. Nora's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared, Vincent. So am I. I don't want you to feel obligated. To think you have to save us. I don't feel obligated. He pulled her closer. I feel alive. For the first time in 5 years. I feel like I have something worth waking up for. That's not obligation. That's grace. They kissed then, soft and tentative and full of promise. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the mountain in white. Inside, two broken people found the courage to hope for something neither had dared to imagine, a second chance at family, at love, at home. The testamentary courtroom was smaller than Vincent expected, wood-paneled and formal, with uncomfortable benches and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. He sat in the second row behind Nora, watching her straight back, the tension in her shoulders. Ruby was with the court-appointed supervisor in another room, spared from witnessing the legal battle over her future. Nora's former in-laws, Richard and Patricia Bennett, sat across the aisle with their attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit. They looked exactly as Vincent had imagined, wealthy, composed, utterly convinced of their rightness. Richard wore a tailored navy suit. Patricia's pearls probably cost more than most people's cars. They exuded the kind of privilege that believed money and social standing trumped everything else, including a mother's love. The proceedings began with Patricia's testimony. She spoke eloquently about stability, about Ruby's need for structure and extended family, about the advantages they could provide, private schools, cultural opportunities, a trust fund. She painted Nora as flighty and irresponsible, someone who dragged her daughter across the country on a whim, who worked long hours in a service job, who couldn't provide the life Ruby deserved. Vincent's jaw clenched as he listened. Every word was calculated to wound, to diminish, to erase the incredible mother Nora was. When it was Nora's turn, she spoke quietly but firmly about her choices, about wanting Ruby to grow up somewhere peaceful, about working hard to build a stable home. But Vincent could see the judge's skepticism, the way the scales seemed to tip toward the grandparents with their money and resources. Then Nora's attorney called Vincent to the stand. Speaking, the truth. Vincent walked to the witness stand. With the same calm he brought to high-stakes business negotiations. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and settled into the chair. Patricia's attorney, sensing an opportunity, went for the throat immediately. Mr. Ashford, how long have you known the defendant? About 2 months. 2 months, the attorney repeated, letting the short time frame hang in the air. And in that brief period, you've inserted yourself into this family dynamic. Why? Vincent met her gaze steadily. I wouldn't characterize it as insertion. Nora and Ruby entered my life by chance, and I chose to welcome them into it. You've provided significant financial support for Miss Bennett's legal defense, correct? Yes. Why would you do that for someone you barely know? Vincent leaned forward slightly. Because I recognize genuine love and sacrifice when I see it. Nora Bennett is an exceptional mother who has dedicated her life to raising a happy, healthy, compassionate child. I've spent enough time with them to know that Ruby thrives under her mother's care. Or perhaps, the attorney suggested, with a thin smile, you're romantically involved with Miss Bennett, and your judgment is clouded by personal interest. My relationship with Nora doesn't cloud my judgment. It clarifies it. Vincent's voice remained level, but there was steel beneath it. I know what it's like to lose everything. 5 years ago my fiancé died. I spent those years isolating myself, convinced I was better off alone. Then Nora and Ruby came into my life, and they reminded me what family actually means. He turned to address the judge directly. Your Honor, I've observed many families in my business dealings, attended countless corporate events where people bring their picture-perfect families for show. Most of those relationships are hollow. What Nora and Ruby have is real. Ruby is confident, creative, kind, and secure because her mother has given her the greatest gift any parent can offer, unconditional love and consistent presence. Patricia's attorney tried to interrupt, but Vincent continued, The petitioners argue that money and status equal stability. I have significant wealth, Your Honor. I can tell you with certainty that financial resources mean nothing without genuine care. Ruby doesn't need a trust fund or private schools. She needs what she already has. A mother who knows her, who listens to her, who shows up every single day. The declaration. Vint paused, then made a decision that surprised even himself. Your Honor, if the court's concern is about stability and support systems, I'd like to make something clear. I intend to be a permanent part of this family. I'm asking Nora to marry me, and if she'll have me, I'll be seeking to formally adopt Ruby as my daughter. The courtroom erupted. Patricia gasped. The attorney objected. The judge banged her gavel, but Vincent kept his eyes on Nora, who had turned in her seat, tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed to her mouth. I love them both, Vincent said simply, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Nora threw herself into Vincent's arms. Did you mean it? She whispered. All of it, every word. He cupped her face in his hands. I should have asked you properly, with the ring and planning, but standing up there, all I could think was that I want forever with you. With Ruby, you'll have me. Yes, Nora breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. The judge meant. When court reconvened, the judge delivered her decision, with the careful precision of someone who had seen too many families torn apart by well-meaning but misguided interventions. I've reviewed all the testimony and evidence, Judge Morrison began. While I appreciate the petitioner's desire to be involved in their granddaughter's life, I find no compelling evidence that Miss Bennett is an unfit mother. On the contrary, all evidence suggests Ruby is thriving under her mother's care. Patricia started to protest, but the judge raised a hand. Furthermore, the court recognizes that stability comes in many forms. Miss Bennett has established a home, secure employment, and now a committed partner with substantial resources to support this family. The court sees no benefit to disrupting a child's life by removing her from a loving, capable parent. The gavel came down. Petition for custody denied. However, the court encourages the petitioners to pursue a reasonable visitation arrangement that allows them to maintain a relationship with their granddaughter. Nora collapsed in her chair, sobbing with relief. Vincent wrapped his arms around her, his own eyes burning with emotion. They had won. Ruby would stay where she belonged. Coming home. A Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow and the kind of crystalline cold that made everything sparkle. Vincent's mountain estate, once a monument of isolation, had been transformed. Colorful decorations hung from every surface, most of them handmade by Ruby. A massive tree dominated the living room, its branches heavy with mismatched ornaments. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air. Music played softly from speakers Vincent had never bothered to use before. Ruby raced through the house in her red velvet dress, her excitement barely contained. Nora worked in the kitchen, preparing the feast she had planned, her signature dishes mixed with recipes from Vincent's childhood that he had nervously shared with her. Vincent moved between rooms, setting the table, stoking the fire, marveling at how full his home felt. The adoption papers sat on his desk, ready to be filed after the holidays. The engagement ring, a simple platinum band with a sapphire the color of Nora's eyes, had been placed on her finger 3 days ago in a quiet ceremony with just the three of them present. They would have a larger wedding in the spring, but this felt right, intimate, genuine. There's as darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they gathered in the living room. Ruby sat between Vincent and Nora on the sofa, blanket tucked around all three of them. The fire crackled. Snow fell softly outside the windows. Can I tell you something? Ruby said suddenly, her voice serious. Anything, Vincent replied. When we crashed that night, I was really scared. But then you came, and I knew everything would be okay. He looked up at him with those enormous hazel eyes. I think maybe you needed us to crash, so you wouldn't be alone anymore. Vincent's throat tightened. Nora reached across Ruby to take his hand. I think you're absolutely right, he managed to say. I needed you both more than I knew. Ruby snuggled closer. Good. Because now we're a family, and families don't leave each other. Never, Vincent promised. Never again. the new beginning later. After Ruby had fallen asleep in her bedroom, the room Vincent had carefully decorated with everything a 6-year-old could want, Vincent and Nora stood together at the window. The valley below twinkled with lights from Pine Creek, each one representing another family celebrating the holiday. But Vincent no longer felt separate from that world. He was part of it now, connected by the strongest bonds he had ever known. "Do you ever miss it?" Nora asked quietly. "The silence, the solitude, the control." Vincent considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity," he admitted, "but I don't miss the emptiness. This, what we have, it's messy and complicated and occasionally overwhelming." And he turned to face her, this woman who had crashed into his life during a snowstorm and changed everything. "And it's the most real thing I've ever known. You and Ruby, you didn't just fill the empty spaces. You showed me the spaces were never meant to be empty." Nora kissed him softly. "I love you, Vincent Ashford. Thank you for opening your door. Thank you for knocking," he replied. They stood together in the quiet house that was no longer quiet, listening to the soft sounds of home, the fire settling, the old beams creaking in the cold, Ruby's gentle breathing from down the hall. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the mountain in white, covering old paths and making new ones possible. Vincent had spent 5 years building walls, convinced that safety meant isolation. But standing here with Nora in his arms, knowing Ruby slept peacefully in the next room, he understood the truth. Safety wasn't about keeping the world out. It was about letting the right people in. And sometimes, the right people arrived when you least expected them, knocking on your door during a storm, offering cookies and hope and the possibility of love. This was home now. Not the house, not the mountain, not the carefully controlled environment he had created. Home was wherever these two people were. Home was messy and loud and full of life. Home was exactly what he had been missing, what he had been waiting for without knowing it. And as Christmas Eve deepened into Christmas Day, as the clock struck midnight and new beginning officially began, Vincent Ashford finally allowed himself to believe in something he thought he had lost forever: the simple, miraculous gift of family, of love, of home. The lonely CEO had spent years waiting by the window, watching the world from a distance. But he wasn't lonely anymore, and he would never stand by that window alone again.